Hello everyone and welcome to my painting demonstration session, and I'm painting in acrylics today, and I'm continuing working on a body of work on the mountains, on Glencoe Valley, the Scottish Munros. So I picked up a darker background color again to keep the tones straight away, kind of see the darkness of the tones and work into the light. And I'd like to work more with a sponge today, so I've got my sponge close by. And on my palette I have some white, yellow, ochre, orange, crimson, violet, a dab of black, and then phthalo blue and ultramarine. I'm going to start sketching with a diluted violet, and let's just see, my background is quite dark. I'm just going to make sure that I can see my lines. I think I can, although they might dry a little bit paler, but I think I can always touch up the violet with a little bit of black if it will start drying too light. Right, so first I'm going to start finding an overall kind of proportion of sky and the land. So my mountain tops will give me that tip that line. I have a little bit more distinctive peak just off center. So I'm thinking of space-wise, I do like the clouds, how low they are, how dark the bottom layer of the clouds is. Actually, maybe if I were to compare, if this is my picture, this is halfway through. So my mountain's kind of almost a quarter. So let's have a look. If I were to compare my height of the board, I think that's a better halfway through point. Okay, so approximately, I think I was more or less in the right place. Okay, tiny bit lower. Right, so I've got my main peak just a little bit off center. And then the left-hand side is going tiny bit lower up and down. And the right-hand side mountains going a bit more flatter and then a bit busier at the back. Right, next I'm going to get my darker slope, very effective diagonal. It starts again just almost from that quarter, maybe just make it tiny bit higher so they don't clash. My lines don't clash. And where does it go? Almost to the bottom right corner. There are different angles to it. There is a little steeper angle, that's a bit more longer one. I want just to make sure that the distance and this distance are of different size, so perhaps just making it even more visually different. Okay, and perhaps sloping it lower, and then it's almost again kind of straightened. So from the perfect line, just to have that little variety. Again, let's compare that shape and that shape. I think maybe a bit more further down, they look too similar in size. Maybe right at the end, somewhere here. Maybe that angle gently changing as well. So that variety is happening, more pronounced. Okay. Okay, good. Right, and the valley at the back, we can see some of the water, some of the glens, and they've got some nice darkness to them. There's lighter what I'm guessing there's some of the opening of the sun of the skies there, so it might just give you a bit more light. And another area's got a little bit of extra darkness. So if I were to frame that lower part of the valley with another ridge just a little bit lower than halfway through. Okay, halfway through, a little bit lower. Okay. And it's gonna come getting much flatter in angles there, and then the whole valley, almost like the base of the valley, gently goes up. As we are quite higher up here, so that's why that line goes gently upwards. Okay, and then we can have a look at the other side, the other ridge of the valley. Okay, one there, that's a nice dark mountain, but actual shadows coming deeper from its back or from its neighbor. Okay, making those connections. Okay, then picking what's more important. There's a lovely darkness on this point, but there are a few more peaks behind it. Okay, it's a little more shallower valley, and then we can see the terrain going gently lower. I think might just drop this one even lower. Okay, and perhaps just giving some of the shapes to those locks, and then picking up what the better shapes, and then maybe perhaps removing the other ones, kind of getting those partially oval endings. Okay, this one's got quite a lot of light and a little bit of darkness as well. So drawing kind of ovals helps me to show how flat that area is, and also my contours of the mountains help me to see that terrain there as well. Things that developing maybe a little bit lower here. Okay. Right, any other shapes we need to pay attention to? Right, let's have a look at the light at the front. Let's get that quite narrow triangle with an extra shadows. It appears like a line, but perhaps it will be moved into shadow, maybe partially will be blended with its shadow and partially disappearing into the light. I just want to tweak. Quite like the idea this point is quite high, but will I actually need it being so tall? See if I can drop it a little bit lower. And then when I'm painting the mountain, the clouds, it does separate us from the clouds. We perhaps will be even higher to be in the cloud. Lovely and low edge, a little more space up here, and also planning a shadow straight away. That shape, something happening there. So I'm looking light, dark, thinking of overall pattern of it. Okay, somewhere there. Right. Anything else happens here on this slope to make it a bit more exciting and also showing the depth? So there will be loads of texture, strong lights, sorry, strong directional lines going this way. What about this slope? A little bit steeper than the contour. And there is some lovely dark woodland. And it's been monitored by forestry department. That's why it's got a sharper edge. Just gonna make it a little bit more narrower. Okay, and then it probably goes into the terrain of rocks and follow the more natural environment. Okay. Right, quick wash for the shadows. Quick wash with a diluted, similar diluted violet, just to see some of the basic shadows. So I'm using a flat brush, maybe a little bit thicker violet, but still very transparent. Just want to see the whole picture a little bit more united with the dark before I start introducing lights. There's another reason I wanted to pick up this area a little higher to have the different proportion for the light and the shadow. Well, sometimes those exaggerations are vital. Okay, might have a little bit more light here on the slope to have that extra light on the opposite mountain and that forest. And then I will look out for the gentle dip in my line through that as well. The shadow. They have a little bit overdone. No, I think that's really fine. Again, just looking for directional lines, just looking for a little bit of extra supportive directions. This will be all in the shadow, but a gentle shadow. And this is going to remain, this shape's going to remain darker. Maybe a tiny bit more further into the shape here. Okay, and on the opposite side of the valley, some relief, some of the shadows a bit more broken down. So putting them quite simple, but to suit the shape of the valley. And then this edge is darker, so I'll be constantly comparing which edge is slightly darker or slightly lighter. Then it changes as I go higher up here. I've got the peak very dark, and then it's gently softens that playfulness of the light conditions. Okay, and this one again, this shadow will be going into some light. Okay, maybe this one could come a little closer. I'll leave the darknesses of the mountains at the back as they are. They will be lighter. That will be lighter, but in comparison to this shape will be different. Still checking my line here. Okay. Quite a lot of darkness on my board, but that's quite simplified design. I think some of these shapes are a little bit similar in size. I'll need to bear that in mind when I paint the lighter tones in between, and kind of develop a little bit more variety there. Okay. Right, next I'd like to bring some a little bit of highlights. Now my sky is very bold and light, especially that gap between the mountains and the shadow, and that big highlight on the cloud itself. So it might look too light, and it's sort of fighting against a lot of darkness. I think if I start applying some of the lighter tones in the valley and right next to us, perhaps some of the lighter tones in the distant mountains, and then come to the clouds. Let's explore that. So as I've done the very simplified shadows, I'm going to go for quite simplified light. I'm going to go for some white and ochre and a little bit of crimson and violet. Okay. So I want something lighter, but mainly lighter against the current darknesses. So I was talking about tweaking the sizes of the shapes here. So maybe I can work straight away into this area. So this color will dry darker because it's reasonably diluted with water, but I'm planning to paint over it, and that will be my preparational layer. If I paint direct kind of final color this stage on such a dark background, it will never look immediately the one we want. We'll just take a little extra layers to keep it light. Okay, maybe I'll bring another brush in a moment and put a little more of a coolness on this shape. This flat brush is harder to make it do round shapes or softer borders. So simplified geometric shapes are much easier, and I'll touch things up after that, but volume wise, this one maybe still a little bit big. And a similar light, but it will be just catching. And perhaps a diluted version, so then it's nice and easy to go bold, but know that it will dry much softer, much more within the current tones. Can't exactly predict how much softer those tones are going to be, but calculated, approximate judgment. Okay, anything else here? I think that's a bit that direction of the valley. Okay, a little bit more of color, maybe slightly darker version, but still looking light. Just want to see part of that slope, but much more stronger, intensive tones today. It's quite coppery. To be caught on the border here, just as the light gently changes its direction. And again, can I have blended into gentler darkness? And on this side, we want to see a little hint of light on the border as well. It's eventually tiny bit more extra and tiny bit more extras in their own right. Okay. So that light is going to be here, but this light, okay, might be covered. Okay. Again, if I've got the lake here and that mountain corner, just show, I will have a different color there, but can the mountain corner have tiny bit of light? think this loch is going to be a little more shallower as well. Okay, it's drying quite nicely. We'll see how that one will finally settle. Right, any other light? I think this light could go higher. Means that the shadow could travel slightly higher as well. Just using my sponge first just to soften. I know it's not near to finishing layers, but just an atmosphere of softness and the edges being more playful is good. Right, and maybe next to me, I'll change my light to a little bit of green or hints of green, and maybe a slightly different color scheme to the valley. A little bit of green. And if there is some of that red and orange, maybe it will be on a slightly different range. Maybe more with purples and violets and green, and we'll have more oranges and ochres and yellows in the valley. Is that light enough? And against this purple, I can put some dry brushed colors. Come to that. Okay. It's building up. It's a little darker. Okay, so now it looks like we're in total darkness. We've got that Mordo effect, so let's get a little bit of light in the sky. Might just keep this brush with the colors it has and use some cooler colors now with a different brush. Right, let's have some white. And I'm gonna start with the light between the mountains, but I'm going to plan it slightly darker than perhaps the final color. I'm using some white and phthalo blue. I want to use a small dab of black. Okay, it does look very light against my board. Bring a tiny bit more pigment. Okay, that's okay. The reason I like doing it slightly darker, because there are smaller marks almost left by the clouds at the back. It's quite exciting to put fresher white on top. And again, this gray tone, gray blue, blocks the very dark background color. Okay, maybe this one go for a little bit more defined, thinner point. More. Okay, if I mess them up, I can always paint them back with a darker color. For now, we'll just get that light in. It will dry a little easier to see. Softer, bit more sharper border here, a bit more softer border on the other side. Let's see what's the silhouette is going to be here. Maybe leave a little bit of space for the blues, the paler, more fresher blues. At the same time, I can paint the distant mountains over my blocks of color. But again, as usual, it is always a nice practice to almost plan them ahead and explore the shapes. You almost have 2 takes or more takes on that layout. Okay, maybe this mountain will have a tiny bit more higher point as well. Okay. And a little more gray, perhaps tiny bit of violet. I want to work with slightly darker color, maybe tiny bit of ultramarine, violet, gray, bit of white. Now let's put all of that color here. It's quite a big size, maybe working with a sponge will be easier. I use the corner of the sponge. Just mixing the same color. At least that is my aim. It will end up slightly different. I'm aiming for a similar color, so a larger block of light. Takes longer to mix it with a sponge, but then the coverage becomes quicker. And also moving to another color is also easier, so immediately I can add more light. It's nice and soft. So it's reflecting gently here. It's a bit of that softness. And I'm gonna go for my darker tones as well quite quickly. I think I might have more proportion of ultramarine here. And then violet. Need quite a bit of paint. I don't think I mixed enough. Violets still need to be, otherwise there just will be a very blue gray. But the blue need to be a dominant color. Well, at least it feels to be a dominant color for most of the shadow. Okay. And then I can do variations, add variations of that darkness. Okay, if I can get rid of all my background little spaces, small dots are not so effective. If they left by accident. Just a little extra variation of light. There's a big group of shapes. It is working. So I'm adding a little extra lighter tone. And then we'll work on extra color there as well. Something a bit more softer. Maybe the shadow softer and lower. And then some subtones. And it's not all dark. It's gentle dark. Stretch. The one the continuous darker line. I wanted playful. That's appeared, disappeared. Okay, that's two. Something missing. Okay, maybe that one's again goes up and down. Maybe slightly lower. And as the colors are settling in, I can see better what's happening. But overall, suddenly we've got the color over the valley. Now lights are not as strong anymore because the white, sorry, the sky is more dominating. We have a bit more of a solid plan for tones. Right, as I've just dried my sky, I think I'm going to carry on working on that. I want to have more color and improve on some of the darknesses and light. So ultramarine and some blue. A dab of violet. So now I'll use a brush and a sponge. Will come as softening tool, as border creating tool. Okay, that's too dark. So maybe even a little bit more water on the brush. So it's not too solid. Okay, that's the shape of the shadow, almost like a little sub-step for this area. And much softer this side. Oh, this is a little too precise silhouette. And that one is good. Can create a bit of grain. If it's too much, I can always paint it back. And I think that creates too much texture. There's enough texture everywhere else. That's fine. And let's bring some extra light. Any other extra darknesses before going to light? Well, I've got this darker color on my brush. I think maybe a more defined little patches here. Getting a small amount of white just to get the colors stretched out, not immediately arriving into and in between tone, a little bit softer. The smaller changes to the light. Here. And some fresher white. Maybe a fresher white with a dab of ochre in it. So got some sort of warmth. It's not fresh white anyway. Still have some blue, some violet, some black in the mixture. But there is more warmth than anywhere else in the cloud. Reflective. Okay. And even more light somewhere here in the border. No, this is way too early for very bold light in the picture, which is full of shadows. I think it might just bring that extra excitement, or kind of give us the tension. I always use my previous color as peaks of the distant mountains, but didn't go too low. To make it by accident. Just a little range of strokes. Okay, let's that be as well. Something overhanging that sky. I think I might still, let's see how that one dries, but perhaps even getting some of the darkness back. Okay. Right, let's come back to our mountains. Change. So I quickly wash my brush so it doesn't dry. I tend to wipe it, partially clean it, so it's not the most clean, but it is ready to be loaded with any other cooler colors. And also I keep it damp, so it's on the table. Gives a little extra moisture, just lying on the tissue, so I can pick it up at any point. And I think I actually will continue using it. I want to work with some of the ultramarines on my mountains. So my extra fresh white and blue, which will need to be shadow, but not overly dark. We've got some warmth and we've got some coolness in the mountains. If I'll start with the coolness, the warmth could be applied over. What I am looking for is to have a contrast against the light of the sky. I think that is slightly too light, but perhaps some lighter color will work for the distance. I think my left pale blue was close, but not quite enough. So this one needs to be darker. Might help myself with some violet to make the color slightly darker. Okay, that's nice and dark, perhaps a little too dark. Just wiping my brush. There's some white trapped at the roots of the brush, so it's mixed, mixes with my blue, and gives that just a small number of lighter paint. Okay, I think that's will be the color here. Extra depths of violet and ultramarine. I can plan this strong shadow. Lower into the valley, lighter. This one is a good shadow still. Okay, any other coolness? See, that's will have a lovely light, maybe tiny bit of the sharpness. Okay, it's not quite happening, it's too wet. Let's come back to that. Maybe some of these shapes. Will be a borderline of that dark blue and purples. Strong color, but that's okay. I'm happy to start with that and then reduce its volume. Okay, anything else here? Right, let's gently blend it with warmer colors. Some ochre, some crimson, a little more white, some orange. I think crimson is going to be a dominant color here. More towards the violet rather than just red. So then I'm not clashing too much with the background. Okay, this is a little harder to see. shine light, tiny bit of that sunshine light. You want to paint the cool separate from the warm, so they have more of their pure qualities of color. At the same time, then they blend less effectively. Okay, still a little basic, but getting there. Now the valley is getting much more darker vibes of tones than what it initially looked. So we can start working into its lights as well. Pink again. Yeah, harder to see with these reflections what's actually happening. Well, let's be a tiny bit more patient. Okay, that's a bold shadow. And this bold yellowish orange is not going to remain so strong. It will gently be absorbed by the borders, by the down borders. Okay, but let's just test a different light. to do some dry brushing, so the texture left from my brush will raise the surface of the paint a little. I'll let it dry and I'll continue doing some more dry brushing, and the surface becomes just that little patchy. So when I drag my final layers of color, it will only touch the peaks of that roughness. Ready for something fresh, white. I don't want to end up at the top. Too much smudges and the paint, sorry, too much paint, and that becomes the area becomes smudgy instead of dry brushed. Okay, let it be for now. Right, then let's have some more depths into our shadows. This one dried too light. Can't see the peak. Mhm. This is drying quite nicely. This one still needs extra darkness and perhaps a little more growing light. And its ridge as well. A smaller brush as well has a bigger one. Let's get some more greens and blues and into my main shadow. So if I'll use my fellow blue, some yellow, this will give me a deeper green. I want my greens bordering with some of the blues. As it's not going to be solid green, but just want to have some of that present. Ultramarine. And this is light, not light. This is dry surface. So almost bring some moisture to that. That's quite an exciting green. Don't know if it's right. It cools off the painting more. And some of my violet as well. I'm running out of violet as well, so let's top it up. I'm going to bring it partially dark and partially lighter. So as I already have some of the light, some of the dark, I'm gonna start with some of the light. It just looks a bit too gray. So perhaps extra red will give the tension. The green and violet mix quite distinctive way. They cancel each other and they support each other at the same time. So if you want an extra darker green, and you can't make any more darkness out of your green and yellow or blue and yellow, use some violet, and that will immediately make it darker. In a little darker slope, I had a little step, just that little corner, and then again green could come closer. So if I end up with lines, I need to turn it to a shape. Get some redirection. Let's just see what's the true color of it. Seeing which more stronger darkness is here than on the camera. I'm not sure if that's a true or false view. So I need to be patient and let it dry. About the lines, so I'm trying to avoid to have line like shape. I think that's drying a bit better, so to have more definition of the shadows. It's similar widths here, so can I get that shape stronger? Green, maybe a slightly darker. Cold. Some orangey green, hooker's green, some earthy green rather than a seawater soft ultramarine. Okay, that's better. That light is settling now as well. A bit more green. Opposite slope. Again, just trying to vary them. The color is too light. Adding slightly ochre and orange softness for my green. To be something between some of those browns, but also connect to the green. Maybe there will be just highlights. All right. And then the shadow. Okay, too wet for shadow. Okay, subversions, some lighter versions of the same color combinations. And sometimes it is harder to look at the whole picture and just paint a small corner of it. So I think when I focus on little details, I'm losing the big shape. So back to big shapes and overall view simplifies that corner. Testing this color against a slope here. It's a bit wishy-washy green. Lower part looks better, but the top part against the solid, lovely blue didn't look right. Okay, any of this light could be here as a dry brush. might need to dry this area so I can test it. So I've got that paler green. I don't want it so strong, so it's there, but I do want it to be soft. That still brings it too close to us because of the dry brushing texture. It's kind of have associations with what's at the front. Little zigzaggy slope, and it is a diluted paint, so it's will dry lighter. So that's got a little something here now. And hair could continue growing. As I'm doing the texture, applying the texture, I'm still applying it kind of in a shape way. It's not just a line. There is a shape to it as well. Right, I think I oversmudged this one. Didn't realize that was still damp. A shame, but let's have to work with that. Right, let it be. And that pass. I really like that light, but I think it will be going. I think it's already gently drying lighter. As shapes dry and you like something, can reinforce it with more solid color. And then we know to what extent we want it to be then, to what extent it's could disappear. And that's all dry. More. That powder gets too long. The whispery mark. Now tone it down if it's too light. Right, let's move to smaller brushes. And I want to see more of the water. So tiny bit more ultramarine for me. And a smaller filbert brush. Some white, some ultramarine, mainly ultramarine and black. So I'm looking for kind of the extra darkness in the water. Maybe even some violet, not as violet and dark as it is now. Maybe still dark. I want to see color there as well. look flat. So if I'll block them in first and then add depths. Looking closer to the picture, I'm not sure what these a little extra light areas. Well, I thought it was more water, just of a lighter tone of reflective surface. Actually, it might be more shallow part of the water or shore. So I'm going to paint shapes without too much questioning what it might be. And moving light. And even here, I've got some lovely boldness of extra light. Not while the paint is wet, the blue, it smudges into my highlights. Maybe a bit too much, almost like snow ice here now. I think I've established my shapes. I can make them less white or gray. And that's okay. A lot of blue in the base of my brush. Let's clean it. Let's just place some depths into the lakes. Let's have extra violet and ultramarine on some of their borders. Try that outline, I'm not too sure about. That to look a little bit more rigid, like a dam, but let it be for now. The reason it looks like a dam because the edge is very sharp, and that kind of width gives us a certain height, as if there was a barrier for the dam. Let it be for now. My water is slightly bigger than I wanted. Still, right, let it be and let it dry. And let's go back to the mountain peaks. Again, blue and violet. Gentle smudge. Looks like it's united the shape, but I know certain areas haven't been touched with a darker blue. When they dry, they might dry as blank as they were before. Yeah, that's a nice touch. Sloping a little wider. Go a little lower. Still. No, this one's not quite there as well. I left it there more than I really needed there. Let's see. Quite like that shape. But what color and how much this light could take over variation. Good. It's too busy and too dark. And still in paint as well covered. Washed. I think that's drying okay. That's just gentle hint of variety. That's looking good. That looks a bit too soft, so maybe still a shadow could come back. I think I'm okay with this area, perhaps a little bit more highlights in there, and just defining a small silhouette of the mountains. and perhaps even tiny touch to the light and color of the clouds. Let's come back to my shape here. I think it needs a small amount of violet. Mixing. Tried quite foggy and exciting, but a little too exciting, so losing some of its definition. So I'm painting this corner, I'm comparing it to another one. Darker on the cooler side. It looks a bit more precise. But let's keep on going. And mixing its color right in the palette, right in the picture. Summarizing it. Shape. Huge lock. Let's break it down. Darkness will go a little lower, and the base of the valley just moves a little closer. I've been recently to Tate, no, that the National Gallery, looking at some of the Turner paintings, and he's very fluent with his texture and brush strokes, not overthinking, just playing it, kind of layering it. And he would be painting in oils, of course in watercolors as well, but I'm just looking at my acrylics and the texture turn I used. And the oils will be drying a very long time, so after so much work, he would have had to stop and let the layers dry at least partially for the texture to remain. So he would have had a lot of patience, but he did paint a number of pieces at the same time, parallel. Well, one is developing, one is drying, another one in the go, and another one in the go. Right, I think I'm happy with that corner, but I do need some light here. I just put a fresh white, yellow, and red. I think I've just run out of my orange, but I only need a little. Light remains where we want it to be. Still bright and exciting. And it travels now a little lower in the valley. Which is slightly strong. It does need drying before I put more flat color. Okay, these two shapes are too similar now. The gap is too similar. Now we've got a massive valley width. Right, I think I'll have to let it dry properly and put back some of that darkness. Right, anything else I can work on as few touch-ups. The blue and violet. For the mountains. Just redirecting some of these strokes. During the process, although there's still quite a lot to do. Last few strokes of darkness. That's a nice one. That's quite nice how that blue came through. A little unexpectedly, but quite welcome. It's exciting as well. Right, I need to wait for the peaks here to dry and see how they settle. I need this area to dry and tweak a few more shapes so it doesn't look huge. Looks like a couple of kilometers there at least, which I need to turn to a quirky up and down valley. Yeah, I've got a little run. I think the shadows are here developing good. Yeah, and still touch up perhaps some of them, some of the sky, maybe soften that white by bringing more softer, lighter tone this way, and perhaps adding a little bit more color. I think same here, maybe a little bit more color variation, so it's not just a gray, but the softness of it is good. Might work a tiny bit more the peaks, a silhouette, and define some of the mountains at the moment are a little too similar to each other in widths, in kind of importance. So that's fine. And a little more light working into this area as well, I think. But I'm slowly getting there. A really good start. Loads of tweaks. Usually takes probably as long as, if not longer, to what it's taken to get to this stage. But it's again part of the process. And I'll let you know when I finish the painting and show you the final piece. Thank you very much for today. If you've got any questions, please ask. Otherwise, it was lovely to have you tonight. And I hope to see you next week. And if you want to give it a go, painting some of it or practicing any of the colors, I'd love to see that as well. Thank you.